There's some kind of drought. The grass in the prairie begins to die, and the only food source is high in the trees. And so the animals that have mutations, such as opposable thumbs and eyes that are more in the front of their head, would give them an advantage over the other animals in that they could climb the trees with opposable thumbs. And so they would climb the trees and get to the leaves, and they would survive, and that genetic trait, that mutation, would then be passed on to their offspring. To put it in high school terms, the mutants are like the nerds. And none of the girls want to date the nerds because they got these eyes in front of their head, and they have opposable thumbs, which are really gross. So the girls don't really want to date the nerds because they're mutants. But that's the way it normally is. Let's say that there's a drought, and all the grass begins to dry except for the leaves on the top of the trees. And now all the football players without the opposable thumbs, and the popular folks, the class favorites, the ones that don't have eyes in the front of their head and don't have opposable thumbs, they can't climb the trees to get to the food source. And so who could climb the trees and get to the food source? The nerds. So the nerds begin climbing trees. They begin getting all kinds of food stuff from the top of the trees, and they bring it down. Now the girls think the nerds are pretty cool. The kind of man you'd want to marry because he's got food. The first book Darwin wrote was called On the Origin of Species, which is about natural selection. You know what his second book was called? See, nobody knows his second book, but it pertains to this. His second book was called The Descent of Man, which is looking at human evolution. And the descent of man actually is not talking about natural selection, but sexual selection is what we're talking about now. The nerds have all the food, and so now the girls like the nerds. They want to marry them. That's generally what happens, isn't it, in terms of real life? They date the football players, and then they get out of school. What do they do? You marry the nerds because they're the ones with the jobs. Football players, they want to play professional football, and they're not getting on the team. And so you date the nerds, marry the nerds. So there's some kind of sort of resonance that's going on here. That may be the reason the theory is so popular. But anyway, they have babies with the nerds, and those opposable thumbs and eyes in front of their head, they're passed on to the babies and so on. And then the next generation may have more opposable thumbs, and the eyes are further in front of the face. It makes them more adapted to the environment. And so living in trees has caused man to begin to develop human-type characteristics, such as opposable thumbs. You see this little mouse lemur climbing the tree. And the fact that the eyes are in the front of the face, that causes the field of view to overlap, which creates a stereoscopic vision that makes depth perception easier. And that's important when you're jumping from one tree to the next, right? Depth perception, because you're talking to your buddy and you say, how far do you think that tree is? And his eyes are over to the side and he's going, well, I'd say about 2 feet. Guy at the front is saying, man, it looks a lot further than that to me. You see? Well, let's jump anyway. It's not 2 feet, it's 20 feet. So the guy jumps and kills himself. And he doesn't get married. He doesn't have babies. But the guy who decides not to jump because he has better depth perception, he doesn't jump, lives to have babies. And that's important in evolution, that genetic trait is passed on through offspring. And they explain it through this natural selective process.